How's it going, everybody, on your Saturday morning, November 9th? This is your Saturday edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Degens, of course, as always. I woke up really early this morning, and I couldn't go back to sleep, so I said, you know what better to do than to go ahead and start my research for today. Only, 4 games on the slate, so didn't take me as long, so I said, you know what, I'll just go ahead and record a pod, because I just felt like it would be easier to do that than to have to write my notes down 2 times, more so on my paper, and then, in chats and so on and so forth on Twitter and whatever it may be, DMs and all that good mess. So this is your Saturday edition. 4 games on the slate. As always, we'll run through the games, talk about spreads, talk about the totals, and then we'll jump right into the positions. Hopefully everybody got on the roster monster last night with Dame Lillard. 60 real points, put up 75 fantasy points. Totally crushed it. Everybody faded due to the back-to-back. I wasn't afraid. Sometimes you got to pick those spots because those are the guys that are going to, get the lower ownership, especially with guys above them that were higher priced. Luka Doncic, who, still balled out with a triple-double, but either way, D'Angelo Russell, those guys, either way. So let's move on to today. Like I said, we got a 4-game main slate. Got a game that starts at 4, but I'm not going to cover that game. It's not a part of the main slate, and I just didn't add it in here. So that being said, game number 1 is Pelicans at the Hornets. New Orleans -1.5 here on the road. 232 total. Got some nice totals on the board today for these 4 games. Not really one that's under 220 so far. We don't have a line on the Mavericks and Grizzlies. We'll talk about that here in a tick. Rockets at the Bulls. Houston -6.5 here on the road. 233 on the total. So obviously you got a 232, a 233, and then you have the Warriors traveling to Oklahoma City to take on the Thunder. The Thunder are a 12-point home favorite with a 220 total. So obviously implications early on are that the Thunder will blow out the Warriors. Warriors are on a back-to-back. Of course, they played last night. So it's not a great spot for the Warriors. Thunder have been pretty decently better at home. So not exactly crazy about this game, but I do like some value plays in it. I do like, of course, some plays as well. It's 4 games. You're going to have to play something. So last but not least, you have the Mavericks traveling to Memphis to take on the Grizzlies. We don't have a line here. Obviously, Carlisle's talked about resting Kristaps on back-to-backs. I wouldn't be surprised if Kristaps got rested. I'm not really sure yet. Obviously, that's going to make Luka Doncic massive chalk, and for good reason. I mean, he's seeing a plus 2.17% bump in usage, up to about 37% without him on the floor. And he's also averaging an extra, almost 12.5 fantasy points without Kristaps on the floor. So it's a great spot. And, of course, Memphis being one of the worst point guard defending teams. Actually, they are, I think, 6th most to the point guard spot. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about the pace in these games. Pelicans, Hornets, this one's going to be fast. The Pelicans going at the 4th highest pace in the NBA. Charlotte ranked 23rd. This is a pace-up spot for Charlotte here. Obviously, whenever you have a team that comes into your town, into your gym, and they run with the top 5 pace, you're gonna have to play with that pace. So Charlotte, I think, has a lot of value here. Not a big spread, 1.5. I mean, they're not really giving the Pelicans a whole. So a 230 total, 232. It's one of the, it's almost the highest total on the board, other than the Rockets Bulls. And I really think you're going to find some value here with the Hornets, because obviously the Pelicans don't play defense. We know that. So anyways, wanted to talk about that one. Also, Rockets, Bulls. Rockets coming in with the 2nd highest pace in the NBA right now on the season. Chicago is 16th. Obviously, this is going to be a game that showcases a lot of offense and not a lot of defense. And Houston's not a big favorite here. A favorite of only 6.5. Otto Porter is out for the foreseeable future, I'm told. So that's something worth monitoring. It looks like Chandler Hutchinson is going to get the start. It sucks because I went straight to Denzel Valentine and noticed that he just got assigned to the G League on Thursday. I really wanted to play Denzel Valentine because he has such good upside. Hopefully they'll call him back soon. let's see here. Warriors at Thunder. Golden State coming in with the 13th ranked pace in the NBA. OKC 18th. So you got two teams here kind of middle of the pack. Golden State right outside the top 10 here, but this is the one with the big spread. Well, OKC minus 12 at home. I think a lot of people might shy away from this game because it's one of the lower totals. It's only 220 and such a big spread. So you kind of, I'm sure everybody's going to want to play DAR again, but this isn't the greatest spot for DAR on the road here. He's got decent defense on the other side with Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's not exactly the greatest spot. Not a really whole lot of Warriors that I want to look at, honestly. It'll probably be like DAR and Alec Burks. And really, I'm just not crazy about any Warriors. Do like some Thunder, of course. But again, so last game, Mavericks and Grizz. We know the Grizzlies, ranked 6th highest pace in the NBA right now. They do play with a lot of pace. It's at home. This will be a great spot, obviously, if Kristaps does sit. Mavericks play, they're 19th in terms of pace. They've actually bumped up quite a few spots within the last week or so. I like this game. I really like this game, and I don't think a lot of people are going to look at it. For the simple fact that the Mavericks played a back-to-back last night. If Kristaps sits, obviously everybody's going to go straight to Luka, which is totally fine, and I'll probably play some too because it's just a total smash spot. But the Grizzlies have a lot of value here. They're not very good against defending centers. You have Brandon Clark, Valanciunas, and Jaren Jackson Jr., who's only 4.7K tonight. Unreal. We'll talk about that once we get there. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Point guard, Russell Westbrook, 9K, over 55 or more in his last 2 of 3 on the road. Chicago, we know, can't really guard as well against guards. 26.9% road usage. Every time I play Russell Westbrook and I don't play Harden, Harden goes off. So I'm just going to play both. How about that, right? Let's just play both. Okay. Luka Doncic at 9.6. Of course, if Kristaps is out, again, he's got like a 37% usage rate. Without him on the floor, gets a bump of 2.17%. And like I said, averaging around about 12.5 more fantasy points without Kristaps. Memphis allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the point guard spot. Makes him very, very interesting in the event that Kristaps sits. And even if he doesn't, he's still an elite play. He's high. He's 9.6. He's like third or fourth highest on price. I think Harden number 1 easily. So he might be second or third actually. Either way, he's high price. But the guy put up another triple double last night, and he was he's just a beast. He's a monster. D'Angelo Russell, OKC, 11th most fantasy points to the point guard spot. 82 fantasy points last night. His price only went up 100. 37 field goal attempts last night. 41% usage. That is insane. Insane. 37 field goals. That's like Harden type stuff right there. He's going to continue to do it because guess what? The Golden State Warriors don't have anybody else, and it looks like it's not confirmed, but it looks like Steph could miss the rest of the season. This is crazy. It's one of the crazier situations I've seen. D'Angelo Russell's only 8.5K. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of this spot with him going on the road into OKC, playing on a back-to-back, and OKC being such a big favorite. It's a decent total, though. I don't know. It's one of those that you kind of just got to make a stand on. Either you play it or you don't. And at the moment, I'm kind of iffy. I'm not sure. I'm really not. Either way, 41% usage. 37 field goal attempts. That's just insane. All right. Gilgeous-Alexander at 7.1. Golden State allowing the 4th most. Here on the flip side, I do like SGA quite a bit. We know DAR doesn't play good defense. He's got like 130 defensive rating, and they're just not defending the point guard spot well. We know Chris Paul is the point guard, and he's on here as well, but SGA runs the point a lot too. He's a big ball handler. He's really good at what he does. 39.4 average. Fantasy point average in all of his home games, 1.13 fantasy point per minute at home. And we know, like I said, it's a bad defensive matchup here, and it's a great spot. As long as the Warriors can stay in it for 3 quarters, SGA at 7.1 I think is a great play. Terry Rozier, major bounce back spot here at 7K. He just got shut down by Boston, literally shut down, played 19 minutes, played like total shit. New Orleans here coming into town. they are allowing, like I said, there's going to be some value on the Hornets. I think Rozier is one. They're allowing the most fantasy points to the point guard spot, over 30.3 fantasy points in his last 2 or 3 at home, carrying about a 21.9% usage rate at home. So, again, Rozier at 7K I think has decent value tonight. CP3 at 6.8, of course, said, fading that Golden State backcourt here. He's 6.8, not exactly my favorite price, just because I don't know about his upside. Plus, SGA is the one that's getting all the usage. But, you can't ignore the fact that he's had over 31.5 fantasy points in his last 4. Golden State is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the point guard spot, of course. But he's scoring, but he's not, dishing a lot of dimes that you would want him to, and he barely gets any rebounds, and he's not really doing any defensive stats. He hasn't been getting any steals. He doesn't block anybody, so it's just like his upside is limited, and at 6.8, I don't think I'm going there. But I wanted to put him in here just because of the simple fact that it's a great matchup, and they don't play defense. Golden State doesn't play defense. So, but if I have to pick, I'm going to pay a little bit more and go SGA there. Devontae Graham at 6.7, again, another guy that I want to play on Charlotte. 37.5 and 56 fantasy points in his last 2, 25.2% usage at home, 26.9% usage in his last 2 games. Graham is a stud. He comes off the bench. Again, I want to attack this Pelicans defense as much as I can. I don't think a lot of people will go to the Hornets, and I really like them as a dark horse stack here. I like Rozier. I like Graham. I like Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges had a nice game. I'll talk about him here in a minute. Let's see. Kobe White at 4.3, 31.8% or 31.8 fantasy points versus the LA Lakers at home in their last game at home. It seems like he might play up to stars. Whenever, LeBron James, his idol, came to town, he put up almost 32 fantasy points off the bench. Tonight, guess what? He's hosting Harden and Russell Westbrook. So, obviously, we know they don't play a lot of defense. He's 4.3K. He's averaging 31.1% usage at home in his home games. That's massive. It's it's the highest on the team. They just lost Otto Porter. I could easily see Kobe being a big beneficiary of scoring on the second unit here, and I really like this play. Obviously, against Houston, it looks like Eric Gordon is back, which doesn't really make me feel warm and comfy about it because likely he'll see Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon's just a try-hard, and he's pretty decent at defense. However, Kobe White's pretty good. High-paced game at 4.3. I'm totally fine playing Kobe White. Interesting, Jalen Brunson at 3.7. If they decide to maybe pull back on Luka, I don't know. It's just one of those ones that I just kind of was like, 3.7K. He's a starting point guard. I mentioned that Memphis is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the point guards. Obviously, Luka handles the ball a lot, but Brunson, he still handles the ball a little bit. I think it's interesting at 3.7. Not sure how much I'll have. So, shooting guard, Harden doesn't need to really talk. 11.8K on the night. He's expensive. He's the highest price. 42.4% usage on the road. Averaging 61.5 fantasy points in his road games with a 1.77 fantasy point per minute in those road games. And he gets the Bulls D tonight. So, don't really need to talk anymore on that one. Drew Holiday at 7.7. 3 straight over 31 fantasy points. 21.3% usage. He's getting the usage. He's the next highest usage under Brandon Ingram, who's the highest. And it's a margin. It's like 6 or 7% because Brandon Ingram's doing everything for the Pelicans. But Drew's steadily being consistent. Again, gets a good matchup here with the Hornets. So I think Drew is an integral part of that game stack, and I will have some. Zach LaVine at 7.3. Houston, 4th most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot, 36 or more in his last 2 of 3 at home, a 30.3% usage rate at home. You got a fast-paced game here with the Rockets, and he's at home. Zach LaVine at 7.3 is too cheap, I think. I could see him easily going for 35+, which would be exceeding his value, and I could see him getting more than that. I could see him hitting 40. Alec Burks at 4.5. Like I said, 32 minutes last game, 34.3 fantasy points last night. I should have said. Looks like him and DAR are going to be a thing. Of course, he comes off the bench, but DAR plays almost the whole game. But he played 32 minutes off the bench. So Alec Burks is definitely going to be a thing. 20.5, 47, and 34.3 in his last 3. 22.8% usage rate in his last 3 as well. They got to have somebody who can score on that second unit. He's been the guy that's been doing it. He's been playing really good. It's not the best matchup with the Thunder, like I said, but he is going to get the second unit, which could play good factor because guess what? He's going to get to play against Dennis Schroeder, who doesn't play very good defense. That's my best spot right there is Burks at 4.5 against Schroeder. That makes it actually worth the while. So I could see playing Burks easily. Like I said, he's getting the minutes, he's getting the usage, he's putting up good numbers. He will continue to get the minutes. So Diallo for OKC, he's decent value at 4.1, over 20 fantasy points in his last 5 games, 20 or more minutes in his last 4, and he gets Golden State defense. I think this is a spot where he could probably exceed his value a little bit. Obviously, Golden State not as good with, keeping the turnovers down. They do turn over quite a bit. I can see him blocking some shots. I can see him getting a couple steals. That's what he's best at. Really like him over on FanDuel probably more as far because he does the peripheral stats are there for him. He doesn't score a whole lot, but those stats will start adding up once he gets those blocks and steals going. So Diallo at 4.1 I think is totally fine. Moving over to the shooting. Well, we're off the shooting guard. Let's go to the small forward spot. Brandon Ingram, 8K, 28.4% usage on the road, 36 or more fantasy points in his last 3 games, over 56 so far on the season. It is noteworthy to note that Charlotte is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the shooting or the small forward spot. So Ingram absolutely will be in play, and he'll be massive chalk. There's really not a whole lot in this list. It's really not a whole lot in the power forward list. The rest of the guard spot's loaded. The forward spot is decent. The center spot, there's really not a lot. So Ingram, like I said, Miles Bridges is another part of that Charlotte team that I want. 6.1, played 33 minutes last game, 34.5 fantasy points. Put up 18 points, 10 rebounds, 1 assist, and a block. 22.2% usage last game. He's only, averaging about 17.6% usage on the season, so had a nice little bump last game. I'm hoping that that's a confidence booster for him. Like I said, this will be a pace-up game for him. B.I. is not exactly a great defender, but he's decent. But again, the Pelicans don't play defense. So he's at home. He's got a decent price. I wish it was probably more in like the 5.6 range, obviously, but that would be too cheap and everybody would have to play him. I think his price is right. And, of course, like I said, I'm not probably going to play him as like a one-off. It'll be more in the game stacks, but I like that game. And I like Charlotte. I think Charlotte needs a bounce back. And he did that against Boston as well. A really good Boston team who, plays Jason Tatum at the 3 and Gordon Hayward at the 4. He still put up 34.5 fantasy points against a really good Boston defensive team. So I'm hoping that was a confidence booster for Bridges and we see what he can really do because last year, towards the end of the season, he was balling out. Of course, they didn't have Terry Rozier. Devontae Graham was playing, but not a lot. So it's interesting, and I'm kind of excited to see if he can carry over. Daniel House at 5.2, 36 and 39 minutes in his last 2, 28.5 fantasy points and 35.8 fantasy points in those last 2. Obviously, gets the Otto Porter-less Bulls, who's starting Chandler Hutchinson. Although Eric Gordon is back, it'll be interesting to see who starts. If House starts, I'll probably be all over him at 5.2 in this game. It's a good spot. If Gordon starts, obviously I think you got to play Gordon. Either one that starts, you probably got to play. I like House a little bit better because he does more. Gordon's more of a scorer. House shoots threes. He rebounds well. And he dishes a few dimes every once in a while. And he plays good defense. Bulls, very turnover-prone team, so House would be a great play. Chandler Hutchinson, again, is your 3.2K free square. He's starting. I don't know if he'll see over 20 minutes. They don't really have anybody else other than like Thad Young, who probably will see probably the run off the bench, I would assume. I'd probably say they split the role. But at 3.2, playing against Houston, who doesn't play defense, you really can't – I guess you can't afford to not play him in a starting role at 3.2K. It's just a free square. So Chandler Hutchinson, there you go. Power forward, Porzingis, we don't know for sure. We should get that news hopefully sometime today, hopefully sooner than later. Don't really want to be scrambling because he sits or because he plays with 30 minutes left to make lineups. So hopefully we get that news earlier than later. But for now, it is against Memphis. It is going to be a tougher matchup against Val down there and, Jaren Jackson, Brandon Clark. I don't exactly love it. Not as much as I did last night. He was good. Last night his price was too cheap at 7.4, and he was in the value vault for Fantasy Alarm. And I said I liked him quite a bit in all of my chats. So tonight I'm not as I'm not approaching him as the same way tonight. Laurie Mark Harkinen, whatever the fuck his name is. Laurie at 6.3, 36.3 fantasy points last game. He gets a 3.2% usage bump without auto on the floor. He's carrying a 22.4% usage rate on the season. I actually like this spot. I don't love the spot because of PJ Tucker, but I think he has quite a bit of a size differential over PJ Tucker. Obviously, he's going to play some 5, which I don't exactly love with Capella, but I think that's a spot that he can exploit a little bit. I wish he was more like 6K, but even at 6.3, I think I'm totally fine with the pace of this game and the no defense. I think Laurie is fine at 6.3. Obviously gets a nice little usage bump there, highest on the team. It wasn't Levine, it was Laurie. So that's interesting to note. PJ Washington at 6K. I think he's priced too high. Over 24 fantasy points in his last 4. Like I said, this is a nice pace game, but he does have upside. He did put up like a 35 or 40-point fantasy game earlier in the season, but he also hit like 5 threes in a row and played really well. Pelicans don't play a lot of defense, but at 6K, I think I might throw him in a stack with that team. But I'm really more focused on Rozier, Graham, and Bridges as far as Charlotte goes. Those are my 3 guys that I really want to target in that game. PJ Tucker at 5'8", put up 45.8 fantasy points last game versus Golden State. Bulls D's terrible. Chicago allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the power forward spot. Thad usually rolls into the 4 spot whenever Laurie goes to the 5. Obviously, he's not playing a whole lot of good defense. Nobody really does on the Bulls. Nobody really does on the Rockets except Tucker. But Tucker at 5'8", price went up immensely. He's going to see the minutes. The minutes are there. The volume's there. It's just kind of up to you. Obviously, those game stacks will have him. You kind of have to have him. Brandon Clark at 5'1", I like quite a bit. Over 20 minutes now in his last 4, 40.8, 19.5, 30.5, and 24 fantasy points in those 4. He should be really good off the bench. Obviously, he'll play some either 4 or 5, whichever, with Jaren Jackson shifting over to the 5. He might play the 4 or vice versa. Either way, Dallas is allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the center spot. Dwight Powell is a little bit undersized here. So I really like Clark here at home, and I really like Jaren Jackson at 4-4. I like both these guys. I like Val too. I think they can all exploit this Dallas, front court pretty easily, especially if Porzingis is out. That's going to make them, probably start Maxi Kleber or something. So, yeah, I'm totally good with all 3 of these guys. Clark, JJR, and, Jaren Jackson Jr. at 4-7, 30 minutes last game. Nobody played him because they said they were going to monitor him the game before against Minnesota. They did. He played 15 minutes. Last game, he played 30, and his price is 4.7 still. DraftKings hasn't caught up on this one yet. Take advantage of it. He still had 12 field goal attempts. He's going to play. he's still going to shoot. He's still going to be a very big part of this Memphis team. And Val's still not playing a full load of minutes. He played 27, and then last game he played 22. Just when you think that he's going to get bumped to closer to 30, and then he drops 5 minutes. I mean, it wasn't his fault. It's obviously the coach. Jaren Jackson, 30 minutes last game versus Orlando, which was a bad matchup in the first place. He didn't put up very many fantasy points. I think he put up like 19.8, but he still played 30 minutes, still carrying almost a 21% usage at home. I'll take all the Jaren Jackson at 4.7 I can get tonight at home. Love the spot. Totally love the spot. Capella at 7-4 in the center spot to kick it off. 51 fantasy points last game versus Golden State. Chicago allowing the most fantasy points to the center spot. Obviously, you got to correlate with Harden with Capella, but I'm totally fine playing Capella as a one-off here. Obviously, you want to correlate with Harden because it's just a very, very high correlation play. They get a lot of pick and rolls, a lot of oops. So I'm totally fine with that. But again, if you want to play him as a naked Capella, don't try to Google that. But I'm fine with it. All right, Valanciunas at 6.2, seen 27 minutes, and then of course saw 22. Again, Dallas allowing 7th most fantasy points to the center spot. He should likely eat against Dwight Powell. I'm sorry, but Dwight Powell is a smaller guy. A smaller center for sure. I mean, he's not a small dude, but he's just a thinner guy. And Val's just a really big guy. So Val should totally eat at 6.2. Like I said, I already talked about him. One more, Steven Adams at 5.4. I'm not really sure why he's under 6K. Golden State has been getting absolutely smashed by center spots. I just mentioned 51 fantasy points for Capella. He's put up a double-double in 2 of his last 3. Like I said, I'm really not certain why he is 5.4K, but I will be playing some Adams. So 25 minutes, right around 26 minutes is right around where I'm going to end this thing. Hopefully I covered enough for you guys to make all your lineups tonight. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend. Big game today, LSU and Alabama. Go Tigers. So enjoy your Saturday, enjoy your weekend, and let's chat later on.